Hello, and welcome back to all players who are finally enjoying the return to live events since the pandemic. And I guess also welcome to anyone who only began playing Yu-Gi-Oh! During the pandemic. I hope you enjoy the live events now that you get to experience them for the very first time. Today, I'm going to be talking about what I think is Konami's biggest opportunity to improve the tournament experience for everyone, and that is the end of match procedure. Now, adjusting the end of match procedure to a 40-minute timer and then allowing play to continue to the end of the next turn would improve player experiences, it would reduce the prevalence of cheating, and it would shorten the overtime duration of Premier events. So recently, YCS Charlotte trialed a 45-minute round timer. That change recognizes the need for a reform to the round structure, but it doesn't correctly address the problem. Adding 5 minutes to the end of each round just pushes the issue backwards rather than actually solving its root cause. So there are three main problems with the end of match procedure. Firstly is the widespread abuse for competitive advantage. The current procedure presents a unique opportunity for a game that commences with very little time remaining to be concluded on the first player's turn. Now, for many years, Konami have done a great job with the Forbidden Limited list, swiftly and effectively removing any prominent first turn kill strategies. But the current tournament policy actively promotes that kind of gameplay. In timeout situations right now, any life point gain or direct damage effect determines the result of the entire match by a first turn kill. Now, when a player wins game one with less than about 20 minutes remaining on the match, they can guarantee the match victory by playing to ensure a one-turn game three. In that situation, the player that's leading concedes game two, whatever is happening, with about 4 minutes left on the clock. They'll go to their side deck and they'll side something in that ensures that they have access to a direct damage effect if they don't already have it in their main deck, and then they'll choose to play first in game three. The game begins with maybe 2 minutes left on the clock after they've shuffled up, and during the main phase of the first turn, the turn player uses their deck, gets to that effect, and does any amount of life point damage by a card effect. Then they just continue making game actions until the timer runs out. It guarantees a victory, the opponent has no opportunity to respond, and the strategy that this is using to manipulate the result of the match is unique to the current end of match procedure, because game three is only played by one player. Now, secondly is the poor customer experience. Players don't like losing matches to this kind of strategy, but kind of more strikingly, the players who do those tactics also don't really enjoy winning that way. Competitive players will use these strategies because they're an effective tool to win matches, but they don't like it. And worst of all, it also introduces unique ways for unscrupulous players to gain an advantage by cheating through stalling in a way that's almost completely undetectable. The player who won game one doesn't need to win game two. All they need to do is slow the pace of play so that the game two doesn't end until the match can be guaranteed in a one-turn game three. And the player who's on the losing side of this, being cheated, they're really unlikely to realize what's going on. They might not know what's happened until long after the stalling has finished. The match result has effectively already been determined, even if in game three they call a judge because they think that game two might have been stalled out in this way. The judge is going to come over and they can't retroactively apply a penalty to stalling that they didn't see. They'll just say, if you suspect stalling, you have to call for a judge immediately, which is correct, but is unrealistic to expect every duelist, particularly newer players, to have the presence of mind to notice what they suspect might be stalling with 15, 20 minutes left on the round and call a judge at that point. Now, on top of that, even the matches that aren't being stalled out to manipulate a game three FTK in this way still create incentives for both players to stall when time gets close. If either player is playing their turn and they see that there's less than 3 or so minutes left on the clock, they're immediately disincentivized from playing at a reasonable pace. There is no disadvantage to being the turn player when the clock runs out. At that point, if you're passing turn in a timely manner, all you're doing is allowing your opponent more time for a counterattack. These situations actively enable and encourage cheating. They make honest players feel disenfranchised, they leave judges feeling helpless, both groups have a really bad time, and they'll be less likely to engage with the game in the future. And the third problem is extended round duration. Almost counterintuitively, choosing the shortest possible duration for play to continue after the in-game timeout doesn't give the quickest conclusion to the round. At Tier 2 events, the current end of match procedure causes so many judge calls all at the same time that tournaments are being delayed by it. The judge calls are a combination of stalling accusations, disputes about the current phase, and both of those things are a direct result of the current end of match procedure. The combination of sort of perceived injustice in the rules and the ability for one of the players to even participate in Game 3 creates a situation where the losing player has no other option in some cases but to call for a judge and then appeal the ruling if it goes against them. Now, that's all they can do at that point because they haven't been allowed to play Game 3. And each of those appeals, it has to be addressed by the head judge, one by one. So at YCS Charlotte, Day 1 Swiss rounds took more than 75 minutes on average. So more than 40% of the total duration per round was after the timer hit 0. Now the solution, I've already said. If the match procedure were amended to be 40-minute rounds and then continue until the end of the next player's turn, there would be improvements on all three of those problems. Firstly, you prevent the match manipulation through those one-time Game 3s. If a game has begun at all before the clock hits zeros, then it will carry on until at least the second player's turn. Player 1 can still try and inflict direct life point damage, but it doesn't guarantee an instant win. And player 2 has a battle phase to try and overcome the life point deficit. Neither choosing first nor choosing second guarantees a win, and so there is no way to force an automatic win through Game 3. Secondly, you improve the player experiences. Removing the mechanism that's currently being used to achieve these free wins in Game 3 means that stalling in Game 2 no longer really confers any advantage. And also adding a full turn after the turn when time is called, players are both incentivized to play at a good pace, even when you're approaching the end of the round. If either player is able to finish their turn before the timer runs out and pass over to the opponent, they know that the game isn't going to be artificially cut short before their next battle phase. Under this system, both players will feel like they have agency to impact the effect and the outcome of the match, and both players are going to feel more satisfied either winning or losing, because the results are going to reflect the performance of both duelists in all three games. Nothing's getting cut as short now as it is by the timeout. And then finally, we're reducing the duration of overtime. By removing the avenues for manipulating the match and incentivizing fair play at a good pace, it reduces the reliance on judge staff for conflict resolution. It reduces the quantity of judge calls and of appeals, and it's going to allow premier events to be completed more rapidly than under the current end of match procedure, despite having more in-game turns. By finishing each round more rapidly, the whole tournament wraps up sooner. So there's an easy opportunity here. Tournament policy can be updated to improve the experience for everyone. Playing 40-minute rounds and then until the end of the next turn would remove the most prevalent cause of FTKs. It would remove incentives for unscrupulous players to benefit from stalling and cheating, and it gives all players a better in-game experience at the end of match. It also reduced the number of judge calls, reduced the number of appeals, shorten overtime duration, and allow tournaments to finish up more quickly.